Have you ever noticed that the person you are hardest on, the person you criticize most relentlessly, the person you demand the most from and forgive the least often is yourself? Have you ever wondered why, no matter how much you achieve, how much you give, how much you sacrifice, there's still this quiet voice inside that whispers, "It is not enough. You are not enough. You need to do more. You need to be better. You need to keep going." And have you ever paused in the middle of an ordinary day and realized that you cannot remember the last time you truly asked yourself a simple question? Not, "What do I have to do?" Not, "What does everyone else need from me?" But, "How am I, really?" Not the polite answer, not the version you give to your coworkers or your family, the real answer. If any of those questions made something in your chest tighten, or made your breath catch in a small, quiet way, this conversation is worth staying for. Because what we are about to explore is one of the most important things anyone can understand about being human. And it is something the psychiatrist and trauma expert Dr. Gabor Maté has spent decades trying to help people see. The self you have been ignoring is not a luxury. It is not an indulgence. It is not something you can keep postponing until life becomes less busy, or until the children are grown, or until you finally reach that milestone you have been chasing. The self you have been ignoring is the foundation of every relationship, every decision, every experience you will ever have. And when the foundation is neglected long enough, everything built on top of it eventually begins to crack. According to Gabor Maté, one of the most common patterns he has observed in his clinical work is that people spend enormous amounts of energy managing everything and everyone around them, while remaining almost entirely disconnected from their own inner life. They become experts at reading other people's moods, anticipating other people's needs, and adjusting themselves to keep everyone else comfortable. And yet, if you ask them what they themselves feel, what they themselves want, what they themselves need, there's often a long silence, a blank space, a strange fog where the answer should be. This is not because they are shallow. It is not because they do not care about themselves. It is because for a long time they were not allowed to. To understand why so many of us end up living this way, we have to gently go back to where it usually begins. And Gabor Maté often emphasizes that we cannot understand adult suffering without understanding childhood adaptation. When a child is born, they arrive with two profound needs. The first is attachment, the need to be close, to be held, to be safe, to belong. The second is authenticity, the need to feel what they feel, to express what is real, to be seen as they are. In an ideal environment, these two needs support each other. The child is loved and the child is real. They do not have to choose between the two. But in most families, especially families where the parents themselves carry unhealed pain, there comes a moment, and then another, and then thousands more, when authenticity begins to threaten attachment. The child expresses anger and the parent withdraws. The child expresses sadness and the parent becomes impatient. The child expresses need and the parent responds with frustration or shame. The child expresses joy that is too loud, curiosity that is too inconvenient, an opinion that is too different, and the message, spoken or unspoken, is always the same. If you want to keep the love, you must adjust who you are. And so the child, brilliantly and tragically, begins to adjust. They begin to sense which parts of themselves are welcome and which parts must be hidden. They learn to smile when they are hurting. They learn to say yes when they mean no. They learn to be quiet when they want to speak. They learn to be helpful, to be pleasing, to be good, because being good is what keeps the connection safe. And slowly, over years, the child stops noticing the parts of themselves they had to put away. They stop noticing that they even had feelings that needed to be pushed down. The suppression becomes so automatic, so unconscious, that they mistake the suppression for their personality. Many people arrive in adulthood, according to Gabor Maté's observations, having spent decades believing that this adapted, edited, carefully managed version of themselves is who they truly are. They do not remember that another self ever existed. They only know that they are tired. They only know that something feels missing. They only know that despite doing everything right, something in them is quietly grieving, and they do not know why. This is what happens when a person loses contact with their self. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, over a lifetime, until one day they wake up and realize they have been living for everyone except the one being who was supposed to matter to them the most. Consider, for example, the person who learned love through achievement. As a child, they may have noticed that their parents lit up when they brought home good grades, when they won a competition, when they performed well in front of relatives. And they may have noticed just as clearly that on ordinary days, when they were simply themselves, the same warmth was not offered. They did not need to be told that love was conditional on performance. They absorbed it directly through the atmosphere of the home. As an adult, this person often becomes incredibly successful. They are driven, disciplined, admired, but underneath, there is an emptiness they cannot quite explain. Every achievement satisfies them briefly, and then the hunger returns. They cannot rest. They cannot stop, because they are not really chasing success. They are chasing the feeling of being loved without having to earn it. And no amount of external accomplishment can ever give that to them, because the wound was never about achievement in the first place. Or consider the person who spent their entire adult life apologizing. They apologize for things that are not their fault. They apologize for taking up space. They apologize when someone bumps into them. They apologize before speaking. From a trauma-informed perspective, this pattern often develops in environments where a child sensed very early that their existence was somehow a burden. Perhaps they had a parent who was overwhelmed or angry or emotionally unavailable, and the child learned that the safest way to exist was to take up as little emotional space as possible. Constant apologizing in adulthood is often the residue of a childhood spent trying to be small enough to be loved. Or consider the person who cannot rest without guilt. The moment they sit down, an internal voice begins to list everything they should be doing. The house is not clean enough. The work is not finished. Someone else needs their help. They cannot enjoy stillness because stillness feels dangerous. Gabor Maté has often pointed out that many people were raised in environments where rest was not modeled or was even punished. Their parents equated worth with productivity. Their families praised exhaustion and treated tenderness with suspicion. And so, as adults, these people cannot give themselves permission to stop because their nervous system still believes that stopping means losing love. Or consider the person who is terrified of conflict. Any disagreement, any tension, any raised voice sends a shock to their entire body. They will do almost anything to prevent friction. They will suppress their own needs, agree with opinions they do not hold, tolerate treatment they do not deserve, all to avoid the sensation that arises when someone is upset with them. This is often not weakness. It is the imprint of a childhood in which conflict was frightening, unpredictable, or emotionally devastating. Their nervous system learned that peace at any cost was survival. And now as an adult, they cannot access their own truth without triggering the same old alarm. Or consider the person who feels empty, despite having everything. On paper, their life looks beautiful. A career, a family, a home, respect from others. And yet, in the quiet moments, they feel like something is missing. They cannot name it. They feel guilty for even feeling it. They tell themselves they should be grateful. And they are grateful. But gratitude does not fill the emptiness. Because the emptiness is not about circumstances. It is about the long-standing absence of a real relationship with themselves. They have built a life that looks right, but they do not fully live inside it. Because the one who was supposed to live inside it, the true self, was left behind a long time ago. What all of these examples share is a single quiet truth. The suffering is not the sign of a broken person. The suffering is the sign of a person who adapted brilliantly and painfully to conditions that require them to abandon themselves in order to remain connected. And Gabor Maté has spent much of his career trying to help people see that these adaptations are not character flaws. They're intelligent responses to environments that could not fully meet them. This shift from what is wrong with me to what happened to me is one of the most important shifts a human being can make. Because as long as we believe there's something inherently wrong with us, we live in shame, and shame does not heal. Shame only deepens the disconnection. But when we begin to understand that our patterns develop for reasons, that our behaviors were once solutions, that our exhaustion is the natural cost of a life lived in constant self-abandonment, something in us begins to soften. Curiosity replaces judgment. Compassion replaces criticism. And where compassion enters, healing becomes possible. But healing requires something that most of us have never truly given ourselves. It requires attention. Slow, honest, unhurried attention to the very self we have spent our lives ignoring. This is why the title of this conversation is not casual. It is not dramatic for the sake of drama. When we say focus on yourself before it is too late, we are pointing to a real risk. The risk is not sudden. The risk is quiet. The risk is that a person can spend 50 years, 60 years, 70 years living for everyone else, meeting every expectation, performing every role, and reach the end of their life having never really met the being they were carrying inside them the whole time. That is not a rare tragedy. According to what many therapists observe, it is one of the most common forms of quiet suffering in modern life. The good news, and it is genuinely good news, is that it is almost never too late to begin. The self you've been neglecting has not gone anywhere. It has been waiting patiently, quietly, for you to turn toward it. And the process of turning toward it does not require you to blow up your life. It does not require dramatic decisions. It begins with something much smaller and much more powerful. It begins with permission. Permission to notice what you actually feel, even if it is inconvenient. Permission to admit when you are tired, even if the culture around you praises exhaustion. Permission to say, I do not know, when you truly do not know, instead of performing certainty. Permission to be sad without immediately trying to fix it. Permission to be angry without immediately trying to justify it. Permission to want something for yourself without immediately calculating whether you have earned it. Gabor Maté often points out that many of the therapeutic breakthroughs he has witnessed did not come from complicated techniques. They came from moments when a person finally allowed themselves to feel what they had been suppressing for decades. A single honest tear can carry more transformation than 100 books. A single honest sentence spoken to yourself in a quiet moment can begin to unravel a lifetime of quiet betrayal. From a trauma-informed perspective, one of the most healing questions a person can begin to ask themselves is this: what am I feeling right now, and what does this feeling need? Not, what does this feeling need me to fix? Not, what does this feeling need me to justify? What does this feeling need in order to be witnessed, respected, and cared for? Most of us have never been asked this question by anyone, including ourselves. And the moment we begin to ask it, gently, without judgment, something inside us begins to reorganize. Another practice that psychologists have observed can be quietly transformative is the practice of interrupting the automatic yes. Many people who have spent their lives pleasing others have completely lost touch with their own preferences. When someone asks them what they want to eat, where they want to go, what they think, they say whatever seems easiest, whatever will avoid friction. Over time, they lose the ability to even know what they want. Beginning to pause, even for a few seconds, before automatically saying yes, and asking oneself, what would I actually choose if no one else were watching? can slowly reintroduce a person to the parts of themselves they exiled long ago. Another gentle but powerful practice is learning to be with your body. Gabor Maté has written extensively about the ways in which the body carries what the mind cannot admit. Chronic tension, unexplained fatigue, persistent illness, digestive issues, and many other physical patterns can often be understood, at least in part, as the body's long conversation about what has never been felt or spoken. Learning to breathe into your body, to notice sensations without immediately labeling them, to place a hand on your chest when you are anxious, to soften your shoulders when they are braced, is not a small thing. It is a way of finally coming home to the physical self you have been living above instead of inside. Relationships, too, become a place of healing when a person begins to reconnect with themselves. Many people spend years in relationships where they perform the version of themselves they think will keep the other person close. They never risk being fully seen because they are terrified of being rejected for who they truly are. But intimacy is impossible without authenticity. You cannot be loved for who you are if you never allow anyone to meet who you are. Beginning to share, slowly, in safe relationships, the truer parts of yourself, the feelings, the doubts, the wants, the fears, is one of the most quietly courageous things a person can do. And it is often in those small moments of honest sharing that people finally realize they are lovable, not despite their realness, but because of it. None of this happens quickly. Healing rarely happens all at once. Anyone who promises otherwise is probably selling something that will not last. What Gabor Maté and many others in the field of psychology have consistently emphasized is that the process of returning to yourself is not a single event. It is a slow, patient, sometimes uncomfortable, deeply worthwhile practice that unfolds across a lifetime. There will be days when you feel closer to yourself than you've ever been. There will be days when you fall back into old patterns and wonder if you've made any progress at all. Both are part of the process. Both are welcome. What matters is the direction, not the speed. If you're willing to begin or continue that direction, there are a few reflections that may be worth sitting with quietly in your own time. Consider whether the exhaustion you carry might not be laziness or weakness, but the natural result of a life spent giving to others while receiving very little from yourself. Consider whether the anxiety you feel might not be a defect, but a nervous system that learned long ago that vigilance was survival. Consider whether the shame that visits you might not be evidence of your unworthiness, but the residue of messages you absorbed before you had any way to defend against them. Consider whether the emptiness you sometimes feel might not be a problem to be fixed, but a signal from a deeper part of you that has been waiting to be noticed. Consider, too, whether some of the ways you have been treating yourself, the harsh internal voice, the impossible standards, the relentless criticism, might not be your own original thoughts. They may be voices you inherited, absorbed, or internalized long before you had any choice in the matter. And what was absorbed can, over time, with patience, be released. Consider that the very fact you are still here, still asking these questions, still open to reflection, is itself an act of quiet courage. Many people never stop long enough to hear these questions at all. And consider, finally, that the self you have been so slow to visit is not a stranger. It is you, the you that existed before you learned to hide, the you that has been waiting, without judgment, without resentment, without impatience, for you to finally turn around and say, I see you. I am here now. I am not going anywhere. That meeting does not require perfect conditions. It does not require you to have your life figured out. It does not require you to have healed everything or resolved everything or forgiven everyone. It simply requires a willingness to stop, even for a few minutes each day, and remember that you exist, not as a function, not as a role, not as a performance, but as a human being with an inner life that deserves care. Gabor Maté's work, at its deepest level, is a long, gentle invitation to that meeting, not a demand, not a diagnosis, an invitation. And whether you accept that invitation slowly, in tiny daily gestures, or all at once, in a burst of insight that changes the direction of your life, the invitation remains open. It has always been open. It will remain open for as long as you are breathing. The reason for the urgency in the title is not to frighten you. It is to remind you that time is real, that the years pass, that the people we love do not stay forever, that the body we live in changes, and that a life lived entirely outside of ourselves is a life we may one day look back on with quiet grief, wondering where we went during all those years. You do not have to reach that grief. You can begin today in small, ordinary ways to come back to yourself, not to become someone new, to become finally the person you have always been, beneath all the adjustments, adaptations, and abandonments. Understanding these patterns will not undo the past, but it can genuinely transform how you move forward. It can change the way you speak to yourself in difficult moments. It can change the kind of relationships you accept into your life. It can change the way you parent, if you are a parent. It can change the way you rest, the way you work, the way you love, the way you grieve. It can change in ways both small and profound the entire texture of your daily existence. As Gabor Maté often reminds us through his work, compassion toward ourselves is not a soft or indulgent thing. It is one of the foundations of any lasting change. Without it, we simply become new critics of an old self. With it, we become gentle companions to a life that has always been asking, quietly, to be lived from the inside out. If this conversation resonated with something in you, take a few minutes before returning to the noise of your day to sit quietly. You do not need to do anything else. You do not need to change anything yet. You do not need to make a decision. Simply notice that you are here. Notice that you have a body, a breath, a life, a self. And offer that self, even for a moment, the attention it has been waiting so long to receive. If ideas like this one, thoughtful, honest, emotionally grounded conversations about psychology, healing, and what it means to live a fuller inner life are meaningful to you, feel free to share your reflections in the comments. What stood out to you the most as you listened? Which idea made you pause? If you would like to continue exploring conversations like this, consider subscribing so more of them can find you when you need them. But more than anything, before you return to your responsibilities, before you check your phone, before you carry on with the day, remember that the most important relationship you will ever have is not with your work, not with your achievements, not even with the people you love the most. It is with yourself. And the invitation to begin that relationship or deepen it or renew it is always, always still open.